Okay, we're going to pick up with how the colonists get from a point where they are an ally with the British during the French and Indian War to a point where they want to eventually break away from Great Britain and to form their own nation. So we're going to go on the road to revolution here and examine how the colonies move towards gaining their independence. So just starting out, the French and Indian War comes to an official end with the Treaty of Paris that was signed in 1763. Now, up until this point, and I'm pointing at the orangish-yellow color on your screen, that up until this point was French territory. The French did have obviously a lot of territory in North America. Now, following this treaty, France is going to be essentially removed from North America. As you can see on the right side of your screen here now, there is no French territory that you can see. Also, as part of this treaty, Britain is going to get all land east of the Mississippi that is colored pink here. France is also going to give up the land west of the Mississippi, or the Louisiana Territory, to Spain, and Britain is going to make a trade with Spain in order to acquire Florida. So Britain's going to give up the Philippines and Cuba in order to acquire this area of Florida. So as you can see, Britain really takes a stronghold in the eastern North America region. Okay, we're going to also start to see friction develop between the colonies and the nation of Britain, as the colonies are going to emerge with an increased confidence in their own military capabilities. They're going to start to look at some of their own generals and have some confidence there. And British are going to be upset that some of the colonists seemed to be interested in making a profit during the French and Indian War than helping the British defeat the French. So there's going to be some sort of a gripe between the two. And after the war, many colonists want to start to move west for a few reasons. First of all, the French were no longer there, so they thought, you know what, we fought for this territory, we can start to move west, we earned this right. Also, many of the Spanish and Indian threats were pushed away from the borders during the French and Indian War, and also the settlers no longer depended on the British for their own protection, so they were more confident in their ability to stretch out beyond the Ohio Valley. However, as colonists move out west more and more, they're going to be moving onto Indian or Native American lands. Now, because of that, natives are going to attack settlers and destroy forts. One of these situations was known as Patriot Rebellion, where they actually were able to destroy, I believe, 9 out of 11 forts in the Ohio Valley region, with the exception one of them was Pittsburgh. But the British are going to retaliate with germ warfare. They're actually going to try and infect the Native Americans in the region with, I believe it was smallpox. So in order to kind of ease things, the British government or parliament is going to issue the Proclamation of 1763. And this proclamation prohibited all settlement west of the Appalachians. So they want to draw a line saying that the British colonists are no longer allowed to move west. Colonists feel very angered by this. They thought that they had earned the right during the French and Indian War for these lands. So the result is going to be that this is generally ignored. So along comes King George III, who is seeking to increase control over the colonies. He also needed money, and not surprisingly, he needed money to pay for the troops that were used both during the French and Indian War and also for the armies that were currently in the colonies. So he comes up with, or Parliament enacts what is known as the Quartering Act in 1765 that required for British soldiers to be housed in colonies' homes and also for the colonists to provide the food for those soldiers that they were housing. In addition, the Sugar Act came about in 1764, which placed a tax on sugar and other products that were shipped to the colonies. Now, this did anger colonists as they felt, hey, we have no control over your decision to place troops in North America, and we're also not represented. And out of this comes the phrase, no taxation without representation. Now, moving further along, I want to continue to look at the situation of British troops and taxes. Parliament's going to pass the Stamp Act in 1765, another act by them that angers the colonists, in which they state that all documents need a stamp to be quote-unquote official documents. Now, this may include things like diplomas, marriage certificates, deeds, leases, charters, and there's many other different things. But the sole purpose was to raise money to support the military. And there's, at this point, many colonial leaders, such as Patrick Henry, start to call for resistance to this tax. And something known as the Stamp Act Congress comes about when 9 of the colonies send delegates to meet, which again was known as the Stamp Act Congress, and they decide to send a petition to the king with a list of their complaints or their grievances. Now, this is relatively significant because for the first time, the different colonists come together in a representative form of government to work out an issue, and it really is a major time because representatives from rival colonies are coming together, and it's kind of a foreshadowing of future resistance or a future time of them working together. And they're going to start to set up boycotts of British goods, and some other organizations come out of this, such as the Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams. And some of their protests against the British around this time are peaceful, but some are not. Well, about 1 year later, the Stamp Act, and on the left side of your screen is an example stamp that had to be posted on documents. The Stamp Act is going to be repealed in 1766 as Parliament passes what is known as the Declaratory Act, which pretty much just says, yes, we're going to repeal this, however, Parliament still has the right to govern the colonies. So that was their way of saving face. And then, a year later, in 1767, what comes about are the Townshend Acts in order to raise revenue or money for the British. And basically, these are just taxes on glass, paper, paint, silk, tea, and there are many other different items. But that money was to be used for paying the salaries of royal governors or British governors and judges that were in North America or in the British colonies. Now, to enforce this, judges in the colonies were allowed to grant what were known as writs of assistance or search warrants to enforce. However, this just basically allowed the British to enter the home of any colonist that they saw necessary. So, in order to enforce all of these acts and to make sure that everything that they wanted to go down was occurring, the British sent many troops into Boston and throughout North America. And as this peaceful arrival of British troops occurs in Boston, colonists become more and more fearful of the British troops being there. And there's an event on March 5th, 1770, where British soldiers are being egged on by some colonists, and they open fire against Bostonians, or people living in Boston, and 11 people are killed. Now, John Adams is going to represent the soldiers at this event, and they're eventually going to be set free. However, this event, known as the Boston Massacre, will become a symbol of British tyranny in the colonies. Now, jumping even further, the Tea Act comes about in 1773, which grants the British East India Company a monopoly on the tax industry and requires colonists to only purchase their tea. This obviously upsets the colonists, and they feel that once again the British are controlling their lives. And out of this comes the Boston Tea Party in 1773, when the Sons of Liberty dress up as Indians and dump tea into Boston Harbor, thus further angering the British. So, not surprisingly, the British then have an act for this known as the Intolerable Acts, which were designed to pretty much punish Boston and the region. So they closed the port until the colonists pay for any damages from the Boston Tea Party. They banned all town meetings, and that was in an attempt to prevent the colonists from coming together. And they allowed the British to house troops wherever necessary. And lastly, Another part of the Intolerable Acts was to allow British troops to stand trial in Britain rather than having to have a trial in Boston. Now, out of this comes the First Continental Congress, where 12 of the 13 colonies are present, with the exception of Georgia. And their first step was to come up with something known as the Suffolk Resolves. And that was just pretty much a denouncement of the Intolerable Acts. And their main purpose at this meeting was not to declare independence, was not to declare war, but what comes out of it is just a petition to fix the grievances or problems that they are finding, and to send these issues to the British King. And a document known as the Declaration and Resolves comes out of this, and they vote to ban trade until the Intolerable Acts are repealed. So that's relatively significant, as they are working together here to get their grievances heard. Also, they state that they are allies with the king and they are subjects of the king, and there's no real desire to declare independence at this point. However, the king and Parliament ignore this. They send more troops to the colonies, thus making it even more of a dicey situation. And then Parliament is going to order General Gage, who is stationed around the region of Boston, to arrest the leaders of the rebellion. Gage doesn't want any type of bloodshed, and he just wants to seize gunpowder and arrest a few of these individuals. So on April 1775, 700 British troops are sent secretly from Boston to Lexington and Concord in order to seize gunpowder and arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock. However, two individuals, Paul Revere and William Dawes, warn the Minutemen that this is going to be occurring, and the Battle of Lexington and Concord will occur, which are the first quote-unquote battles of the Revolutionary War, but they're still technically not at war with the British.